it do for your business if you could learn to effortlessly sense what is incoming and adapt rapidly? Today's guest helps entrepreneurs and business leaders learn to make adaptability their superpower to transform challenges and exhaustion into energy, excitement, and excellence for themselves and their business. Please welcome Dr. Yishai to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here. I cannot stop talking about adaptability and how you can make it your superpower. So I'm just so excited and thrilled to be here today.
I feel like this topic was something that I was like, yes, we need to talk about this. Every single business owner is probably saying, I need to learn more about this. I need to learn what it is and how it can improve my business. So, as a doctor of psychology, how did you become interested in helping entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I love that question. So there's a slightly longer story. I'm going to shorten it for you. So in the therapy practice that I have, I work with a lot of people who talk about issues they have at work. And a lot of them are with their leadership. A lot of times it's at the culture of the company and all kinds of things that get in the way of them really wanting to be there or being able to do work that they love or advancing or growing and really being themselves or their best selves. And obviously in the therapy room, I do very different work than I do with entrepreneurs and leaders when I'm doing coaching and consulting. But in the therapy room, what became really clear is that as I'm working and helping them, that I needed to help them learn how to communicate and do what I call managing upwards, which is to get their leaders to actually pay attention and recognize what it is they're saying, how and why they're saying it, and how to create results out of those things, whether they're complaints, frustrations, issues, whatever it is. And so what I then started thinking about is I could spend my entire lifetime, and like 80% of my patients come in and talk about work issues at one point or another. And I could spend my entire lifetime trying to get and helping my patients learn to communicate and manage upwards. Or I could also work with people who are at the top and in leadership and help them trickle that down so that every time someone is coming to them and communicating whatever it is that they're saying, that they can extract and take something from that that will help them adapt, make their company better, create wins for themselves, for their companies, for their clients, and for their teams, for everybody involved. I think that that's the kind of name of the game when it comes to adaptability is creating what I call win-win-wins is for everybody all around.
Well, and you talked about this really in depth on your podcast, The Business Couch. What episode was it that you went really in depth about this?
Yeah, so one of the episodes that I really dig deep into this is episode 114, which is all about creating and curating and cultivating high performance. And one of the things that I go into three levels there, and I'm obviously not going to have time to say everything on that episode because that episode's like 35 minutes. Um, One of the things that I do really talk about is how engagement, high performance, and the results and outcomes that you want are all interconnected. They're individual levels for you and for your teams and for the people on your teams. They're group levels and processes that I have a lot of training and background in from research and from psychology. And then there are business level pieces. And all of those pieces need to be addressed. And if you can fit them all together in the right way, you can get just incredible, incredible experiences and wins for your people, for your clients, and for your company.
When did you realize that adaptability was really a superpower?
It's a great question. So that comes back to some of my own process and journey, which kind of led me to getting my doctorate in psychology and becoming a psychologist. And one of the things that I realized is that you have two kinds of brains. And there are two sides to this, and they're each working in, I like to call it tension and tandem, kind of like your bicep and your tricep. Like if you need to use your bicep to lift something, then your tricep needs to elongate, you need to release it, and vice versa. If you need to use your tricep, then you need to elongate or let your bicep go. And our brain kind of works that way. So one system is an automating system. I call it your habit brain. Your habit brain makes things become more automatic, faster, and require less input or effort or energy. Like you don't need to think about it as much. It just happens automatically. And it also increases the output. So much of what a lot of people talk about is habits, but and it's really important to develop habits. If you don't have systems and processes for your business, well, then you're going to end up spending so much time and energy just trying to get things done, whether it's for yourself or the people, your teams. And that's going to really get in the way of being able to kind of get your business running and running smoothly and fast. But the other side to that is, I think there's so much that people talk about habits and habits in leaders and in businesses and systems and processes that you can end up, if you only engage that habit, it's like only working out your bicep. Your bicep gets really strong, but your tricep can get really weak. And there are people who can do, 50, 60, 70-pound bicep curls. But if you ask them to do anything with their triceps, they kind of fall to pieces. It's like very loose and wiggly, and they just can't get it done. And you see that in especially larger corporations where they have all these streamlined systems and processes and paperwork and things you need to file and do in a very specific way. But then if you ever need something that's outside of all of those systems and processes or doesn't fit in anywhere, we call this bureaucracy, by the way, right? It absolutely becomes a nightmare, a mess, and a disaster. And it also makes companies and corporations that are larger much more difficult to be flexible, to be agile, to be able to quickly pivot and adapt. It's part of what made, during COVID especially, so many businesses struggle so hard. And the ones that have been flexible and adaptive have been the ones that have succeeded. And that's really bared itself out over the last almost 2 years now.
So, when did you realize that adaptability, like how important it was for businesses? Because I know you mentioned earlier that it can really shape a business. When did you realize that you're like, this could be huge?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was talking to a group of entrepreneurs and they were starting to talk about all the things that they're taking on. And it was really clear that they were getting overloaded. And and I needed to really understand that. I started to ask them all these different questions and they were giving me all this information. And at some point I was looking at it and saying, well, what's happening is that they're using the same systems they had been using to get to the point they're at now. But as a business scales, the same systems aren't going to work. And what they need to do is adapt to the scaling they want to do. Ideally, it would be proactive, where as they're scaling, they're actually adapting the systems and processes and making changes along the way. And they weren't really doing that at the time. So they were getting totally overloaded, and the entrepreneurs themselves were getting overwhelmed and paralyzed at times. And that moment that we were having that conversation, that I was like, oh, right, you are struggling to shift out of the habit brain into the adaptive brain. And if you really want to be able to supercharge your business, if you want your business to be able to grow, then you need to be adaptive, both to what's happening as the business grows, the systems, the processes inside and working on the business, as well as when your clients come to you and tell you things, they complain or frustrated or they're upset, or they're telling you, this I really loved, this was amazing, that all of those are information, they're data, which is part of what your adaptive brain is designed to do, is to give you data. And it's supposed to also direct you and help drive you. And in this case, your company. And that was the moment that I really realized that it's a superpower. And if you don't actually pay attention to it, which so many people don't, they actually intentionally hit the mute button on it or unintentionally hit the mute button. When you hit that mute button, you're actually losing something incredibly valuable, and it can cost you in your business. And so from my perspective, it's either a superpower or it can really hinder you if you totally ignore it.
What's the best way to learn adaptability?
That's a great question. That's a question I get all the time. The issue that I have, and the thing that I've seen, is if you want to learn how to work on your habit brain. I know we talked about the two sides of the brain. If you want to work on your habit brain, there's so many podcasts and books and courses to learn about your habits and use or engage your habit brain. In other words, it's really easy to work out your bicep in that metaphor we were using, but there's very little, almost nothing on the tricep. There's some companies are starting to be more talk about it. It's actually one of the newer waves that's coming up as far as, skills and abilities and more research on it. It's, for me, it's the reason that I started my podcast. It's the reason that I started the coaching and consulting company that I started. And, I would say probably the first thing that I would encourage you to do is check out my podcast, because that's the kind of stuff that we talk about. And those are the skills that we address on a consistent basis. I will say, I think it's harder to develop that than, say, like your habit brain. So it is a skill. It's not something you're either born with or born without, and can never have. And at the same time, that means it's going to take intentional work. It's kind of like training. And so, if you're going to train or you want to develop a superpower or super ability, I know the Olympics, I've wrapped up by now, but for any of them, they all have coaches and they all have systems and processes. But more than that, they have a support network and people around them whose sole purpose it is to help them develop their specific skill, their specific performance, their ability to do what it is that they want and need to do. So if you want to develop your adaptability, find and get around people who can help you do that.
This stuff is so fascinating. I love this. So, by listening to your podcast, checking out all the resources that you have available, and I love the idea of your brain having two systems that can work together to help us reach our goals and our dreams. What do you think the best way to do that is? It's obviously research and checking things out, but what are some, tips to help people sort all that out? Because it's probably a lot in the beginning.
Yeah. And I know it can be overwhelming. So I'm going to give you a kind of simple framework and kind of pull you step by step or show you step by step how you can do this for yourself. And hopefully out of that, you can start to get some benefit, and if you need more, of course, you're always welcome to reach out. I'll give you my information and ways that you can reach out to me if you have any questions. So the first thing I want to share is that your adaptive brain is designed with three purposes in mind. Its job is to generate new awareness, new analysis, and new action. And the way it does that is by actually trying to provide you with data, direction, and drive. I call that the 3Ds. So that's the key for adaptability. It's the key to adapting. In order to adapt, you really need those three things. If you don't have one of them, you are going to really struggle to make that change and be able to adapt in ways that are going to be really helpful, meaningful, and create the results that you want. So the first one, data, is if you don't know that something you're doing is working or isn't working, you have no information, then you can't really decide if you need to double down on it or get away from it, right? And so data is the first piece of this because you need to have information. You need to get information that something either is working, is helping, or is not working, is getting in the way. And the way our adaptive brain does that is it stops us in our tracks. Sometimes it'll do that by way of pushing or pulling. Some people call it the carrot or the stick, right? What it's there to do in terms of generating new analysis is it changes your physiological state. It changes what you're thinking. It changes your mood. It changes what you're experiencing in your body. So the first step is to start to try to become more aware and more mindful of what's going on. I'm noticing that there's something happening that's telling me that either what I'm doing or what's happening is working or it is not working. That's the data piece. The second piece is direction. So once you have information about whether something is working or not, now you need to choose a direction. You kind of need a GPS, right? If you don't punch in the coordinates for the GPS, if you don't have a destination or a goal, then it's going to be hard to decide which way you should go or what you should do. Once you have that, though, your GPS system needs to navigate for you, tell you to go right or left, right? And so that's what the direction piece is. So when your body is changing your physiology, your thoughts, your reactions, or your mood, or even your emotions, what it's trying to do is direct you. It does that in a bunch of different ways. The way I think about your adaptive system is secretly hush hush. It's your emotion system. Your emotions are the process through which your adaptive brain is trying to get you to pay attention to something and either push or pull you, right? They're uncomfortable emotions and they're emotions that really are magnetic. They pull us towards things. If you're excited, you're pulled towards something. And that's for a reason. It's giving you data and it's trying to direct you. Whereas if you're uncomfortable, if you're afraid or stressed or overwhelmed, then those emotions are also giving you data and they're also trying to direct you. So that second piece is trying to extract that. After you've extracted that data, you need to figure out how to direct yourself and do that efficiently and effectively in order to move towards your goals. And if you don't slow down, you're not able to do that. Once you slow down, there's a question I love to ask, and you can ask yourself is, what is this reaction trying to do for me? Not what is it doing to me, because our reactions do all kinds of stuff to ourselves, to our bodies, to our brains, but what is it trying to do for me? What outcome is it trying to ensure or direct me towards? And that will help you with the direction. The third piece is the drive. Sometimes our adaptive brain slams on the gas, other times it slams on the brakes. And sometimes, by the way, it'll do both. And that's when a lot of people feel like their head and their car and their business is spinning. And so what's really important to do in that time and with that drive is to recognize, is it hitting on the gas, slamming on the brakes, in what way, for what pieces? You need to really take the time to sift and pick apart those things. And so what I can do for you is I can actually give you a worksheet that you can use to work through the data, direction, and drive. It has all the directions. It goes through what we talked about today. And so I'm more than happy to share that with you guys.
That would be awesome. I'll definitely link that in the show notes so everybody has a quick way to access that worksheet. Now, you talked about our brains having two systems. Can anything interfere with those two systems?
Yeah, of course. And they can even interfere with each other. So I know I've used the metaphor of your bicep and your tricep, right? If you've ever tried to contract both of them at the same time, you'll know that it's actually really hard to do and it's not always advisable to do. The people who learn to do that are mostly bodybuilders. And they do that because they're trying to show off those muscles. That's why they're trying to contract it. But there's also potential danger. They could break their bones if they contract all their muscles too hard because it pulls on your bones, right? It can cause damage to us. And so one thing to be aware of is that there's a time to engage your habit brain, and there's a time to release your habit brain. There's a time to engage your adaptive brain, and there's a time to release your adaptive brain. If you are not able to intentionally either contract or release, engage or let go of one of those sides, then yeah, you can absolutely end up interfering with each of those systems. They can end up interfering with each other. In fact, for most people, I think the way we experience our emotions is being a disruptive process that gets in the way of our habits or gets in the way of our functioning. And as it turns out, that's the most common way that I see that people really struggle with, and they have a system, their adaptive system ends up unintentionally getting in the way of their habit system. And sometimes it's vice versa. When they're trying to make a change, their old habits are really hard to let go of. And that becomes really challenging. That's where, for example, when I was talking about the entrepreneurs that I was having a conversation with, they were really struggling to let go of the habits they previously had that had brought them to where they're at, and to engage their adaptive brain to make that shift or pivot and then build or develop new habits so that they could really scale up and grow and succeed.
What do you think the best way is to get these two systems running optimally together?
Training. So I know people talk a lot about, you need to work on your mindset. I think you need to work on not just your mindset, you need to work on your adaptive brain, and you need to work on how your habit and adaptive brains are functioning and trying to help you. And that takes a lot of time and intention. And again, it can be really helpful to work on that by engaging somebody who can help teach and train and draw you across that process, who can give you that feedback, right? The reason that anybody in sports, or whether it's in business or otherwise, has a coach is because they can get that feedback. They can have a space in which they can explore, understand, make sense of, be able to make those connections, and be able to develop the skill of intentionally engaging one system over the other.
What do you think is the best tip that you have for entrepreneurs? They know something's not right, they know they have to improve somewhere. What's the best thing that you could tell them if they were listening?
I would say when you're experiencing a disruptive reaction, when you experience your brain, this adaptive system is just being disruptive, it's okay to acknowledge that maybe there's a part of you that's trying to help you adapt that you're not as tapped into, and slow down. It's okay to slow down, to speed up. It's okay to slow down and say, what's getting in the way? Where are the challenges? And that question I asked you before, that I shared before, how is it trying to help me? Let's assume that it's not just there to throw me off my game because my brain is trying to make me fail. Let's assume my brain is not designed to make me fail. If my brain was designed to make me fail, by the way, it could have done it a long time ago and much more efficiently and effectively. It could have done all kinds of things, right? It's not designed for that. It's trying to help. So start from that assumption point and ask yourself, what is it trying to do for me? What outcome would my brain like me to have, that it's creating this disruptive reaction, that's creating what I would call an adaptive reaction. And then how do I harness that? Right? Those aren't easy questions to answer, but at least they're questions. If you slow down, it can help you generate new awareness, new analysis, and then you can take a new action that will help you move forward in a better way.
I love that. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for spending time out of your busy schedule to chat with me about this because I think it's something that all of us entrepreneurs, it's kind of goes against what we've been taught to slow down in order to speed up. So
Mm.
tell me where people can find out more information about you, how to work with you. What's the best place to connect with people?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So, primary place is going to be on my website, dryishai.com, DRYISHAI.com. And then, of course, I'm also on social media. I spend a little bit more time on LinkedIn than I do on Instagram, but you can see me on either one of those. And I'm also on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to link all those links in our show notes so people have quick access to that. Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.